Welcome back to the YouTube home of Peter Pan lore and Peter Pan facts with me, your Peter Pan hobbyist and enthusiast, using my Peter Pan hobbyist enthusiast brain and knowledge to bring you fun facts, lore and trivia, talk about the world of the Neverland, the story of Peter Pan, answer you guys' questions, and do much more longer form video essay content here on the YouTube channel. So today is World Book Day if you're watching this on the 6th of March, is it? Dates. The 6th of March, I think, 2025. If you're watching it today, it is World Book Day. If you're watching it after then it was World Book Day. But the point still stands, read more stuff. And of course, on this channel, we're all about the lore and the history and the world of Peter Pan and the Neverland. So of course, for World Book Day, I'm going to talk to you about this story that I love and know far too well. I'm going to dive into the lore, take you through the plot. Hint, hint, if you haven't read this, the plot is probably a little bit different and way more complicated than you might remember or have been told. I'm also going to mention the way it is written, the beautiful descriptions, give you some of my favourite quotes and passages, and just some of my favourite beautiful and pivotal moments from the story. Alright then, grab yourself a beverage, let's dive in. So what is the story of Peter and Wendy all about then? Well, it's not just about Peter Pan taking the darling children away to the Neverland. That is a huge part of it, and a big part of the story that we follow. However, there are lots of other plot threads going through, and every time I read this, I sort of follow a different one. There's lots of different threads and story beats to pull on, and subplots and character arcs and all these things happening. Although, I take it back, there is one character arc. One character learns and grows through the entire story of Peter Pan, and it is not Peter, it is not Tinkerbell, and it is not Wendy Darling. I will talk more about that in a moment, and a few of you will probably know who I am talking about. But let's just have a quick rundown then of what are all the different plot lines in the story of Peter Pan. Now, this story did start life as a play, and the stage play is my favourite medium for it. However, it is World Book Day, so we're specifically going to talk about the novel. And to be honest, there's not a lot of differences between the novel and the stage play. Arguably, the novel has a little bit more, because it's a novel, you can go into a bit more detail, but I will do a full video talking about the stage play at some point, because some of the stage directions are absolutely amazing, and they give you little tidbits of lore as well. But for now, let's talk about the novel, Peter and Wendy. The primary plot, of course, that most people will probably be familiar with in this story is that of Peter Pan and the darling children, Wendy and her brothers John and Michael. They go off with Peter and Tinkerbell and fly away to the Neverland. While they're there, they live with the lost boys. And so that is plot thread number one. We see the relationship dynamics between Wendy and her brothers and the lost boys, Wendy and her brothers and Peter, Wendy and Peter separately, Peter and the lost boys, Wendy and the lost boys, everyone all together and separately as well. So that is plot thread number one. Plot thread number two, which I say arguably is the most pivotal in the story, is that of Mr. and Mrs. Darling, predominantly Mr. Darling. Now, Mr. Darling is the only character in this entire story with an arc, because he is the only one who really learns anything and changes. Very importantly, changes. Peter doesn't learn anything, he doesn't have to, and he would forget it if he did. Wendy Darling doesn't learn anything because she doesn't need to. She's perfect from the beginning to the end. She didn't need to learn anything different. Her brothers don't, the Lost Boys don't really. Mrs. Darling also doesn't need to learn anything. It is Mr. Darling who does. And boy oh boy does he. Mr. Darling learns how to put aside his pride and learn how to be more engaged and loving with his family. He goes from the person he is at the beginning of the story, kicking Nana out into the yard, putting the opinions of others above his own feelings and wants, to who he is at the end of the story, which is a beautifully well-rounded man who has learned a million lessons, who is so humbled and so much nicer and kinder, who no longer cares, or at least has decided not to care, what the world thinks of him. He put himself into Nana's kennel, blaming himself for the children going missing, and he has just become such a better man to not only himself, but also his family, his wife, his children, and Nana as well. Plot thread number three. And this one is one of my absolute favourites. This is the madness and downfall of Captain Jas Hook. Now, this one gets overlooked a lot in adaptations, and I will do another Hook video. Someone requested it on TikTok. I will do another one at some point very, very soon. We'll have a deep dive into his lore, but in brief, Captain Hook is a fascinating character who far too often gets portrayed as a two-dimensional caricature. He has so much more to him than that. The phrase I use most often on all of my channels is the nuance of Captain Hook, and it is so true. There is a great deal to him, and every time you turn a page and you learn a little bit more, it's like in Shrek peeling the onion layers. There is just extra and extra and more, and he becomes so much more well-rounded as a character. And while you disagree with his actions, you can understand finally what drove him to that point and why he ends up doing what he does through the story. Again, we don't agree with it, but we can see what steps led him there. Plot thread number 4, and the smallest plot thread of all of them, very fittingly goes to Tinkerbell the fairy. Now, Tinkerbell has a lot of jealousy over Wendy and her different feelings, and we learn a lot about her through the story, and then she has this huge, big moment of almost redemption where she bravely sacrifices herself for Peter, and then she gets revived as well. So, small, but huge. And then plot thread number 5, and this is more of an overview of the story, and this is the philosophical dives into immortality, childhood, cruelty, family, sacrifice, forgetting, memory, and abandonment. So as you can hopefully see, there is a lot more to this story than just a flying child takes children away to the Neverland. There is simply so much more than that. Next, we're going to talk about some of the most brilliant and beautiful moments from the story, and we're going to start with one that you probably all remember, and that is to die will be an awfully big adventure. This moment takes place on Maruna's Rock in the Mermaid's Lagoon, and the entire chapter is something I absolutely love, because the setup to how we get the line to die will be an awfully big adventure is just as fascinating as the line itself. So bear with me while I just widdly-woo back in time a little bit. So what happened previously in this chapter is that Tiger Lily was being put onto the rock by the pirates. Peter imitated the voice of Captain Hook, got them to set her free, she dived away to safety, and then Captain Hook really does arrive. He calls out to the voice that says it's Hook, and they have that funny moment where Peter calls Hook a codfish. All of this happens. They then have a giant fight with the pirates and the Lost Boys, and then Hook and Peter are fighting. They both climb up onto the rock out of the water, and then something huge happens. Peter is higher up on the rock, and he's about to stab at Captain Hook and potentially kill him for good when he realizes he's higher on the rock, and this isn't fighting fair. So he offers Hook a hand instead, so the pirate can be helped up and they can both be on an even ground to continue fighting fairly. But Captain Hook at this point shows terrible, bad form, because instead of accepting Peter's help, and in the video where we talk about the madness of Captain Hook, I will mention this moment a lot, Captain Hook, instead of taking Peter's hand in this moment, instead he claws at him twice with his hook. He slashes at Peter, who is then dazed and can't believe that the pirate has behaved unfairly towards him. And then we get a fun little bit of lore where J.M. Barrie talks about how all children behave like this the first time someone's unfair to them because they can't believe it. This has never happened before. How could this have happened? And to Peter, he has forgotten in that way that he always will. He has forgotten his first unfairness. And so to him, this is the first time, and that's why it hits him so much harder. It's described that it's not the pain of this, but the unfairness, the first unfairness he believes he's ever experienced. That's what hits Peter, and it leaves him quite helpless. He can only stare at the pirate, horrified as Hook is about to kill him, but he is saved by a twist of fate when Hook hears the ticking of the crocodile and has to get off the rock, sharpish, and go back to the Jolly Roger. The fighting at this point ends, the Lost Boys go home, they're looking for Peter, they're looking for Wendy, but they can't find them. They decide they must have flown or swum away first, so they go back to the home under the ground to look for them. The pirates have gone away with their captain, and Peter and Wendy are left, washed up on Maruna's Rock. As they come to consciousness, they realise the waters are rising and they are going to drown. But Wendy is too exhausted to fly or to swim without Peter's help, and Peter is too injured to do either. They realise if they don't get help soon, they're going to die. But then Michael's kite comes brushing through the air and Peter grabs it, and Wendy gets sent away to safety on the kite. This leaves Peter all by himself on Maruna's Rock. And this is where we get the beautiful moment of to die will be an awfully big adventure. It's dark. Night is falling and sinking fast. The waters are rising. There is no one coming to your rescue, and you are all by yourself. You are a little boy-like, childlike creature. You have no memory of ever facing your death before, and so to you this is the first time. And what does he do in this moment? So many people would sit and cry and cower and be scared, but he doesn't let himself. Instead, he stands up and he feels a drum beating in his chest, and the drum inside him is saying, to die will be an awfully big adventure. Instead of giving in to fear, which so many people would do and would be completely understandable, Peter, this tiny ethereal creature who is basically a child, stands on this rock and decides it's going to be an adventure. And that moment just it sends shivers, really. I'm going to combine two moments into one now because they fall under the same heading, and that is beautiful descriptions from J.M. Barrie. This first extract comes from the chapter The Mermaid's Lagoon, and you will completely understand why I love it. I have loved this since I was a kid and first heard it on audiobook. Have a listen. If you shut your eyes and are a lucky one, you may see at times a shapeless pool of lovely pale colours suspended in the darkness. Then, if you squeeze your eyes tighter, the pool begins to take shape, and the colours become so vivid that with another squeeze they must go on fire. But just before they go on fire, you see the lagoon. This is the nearest you ever get to it on the mainland, just one heavenly moment. If there could be two moments, you might see the surf and hear the mermaids singing. I feel like that speaks for itself. I do not need to explain why I love that description. It's just absolutely friggin' stunning, and just a tiny glimpse into the world of J.M. Barrie's writing and why I love this story so damn much. This other extract is coming from the chapter The Pirate Ship, and it's one I reference a lot. One green light squinting over Kidd's Creek, which is near the mouth of the Pirate River, marked where the brig, the Jolly Roger, lay low in the water. A rakish-looking craft, foul to the hull, every beam in her detestable, like ground strewn with mangled feathers. She was the cannibal of the seas, and scarce needed that watchful eye, for she floated immune in the horror of her name. So I just friggin' love the way that he writes. It has always grabbed my attention ever since, as I said, first time I heard it was on audiobook when I was a little kid, and that was the abridged version, so imagine my brain exploding when I read the actual full text. It was absolutely amazing. I love how he draws you into a scene without just stating facts. The ship was sitting docked in the harbour. I don't think he could ever write that sentence. And this is something I've always tried to incorporate into my own writing as well. If you want to see any of my own stories, I've done a few different takes on Neverland stories. I've got some Peter Pan fiction I'm working on, but I've also got a load on my Morcus Noise cosplay account on my YouTube channel there. I create stories all the time, and on Archive of Our Own. Morcus Noise, same name pretty much everywhere except for here, where we're Peter Pan lore specifically. I simply cannot think of anything more boring than telling, not showing. Show me what's happening. Paint me a sumptuous picture. Don't just tell me the Jolly Roger was in the water. If you just said to the reader, the Jolly Roger was the most terrorizing ship in the seven seas, all feared her. Sure, you still get the point, but is it as brilliant and sumptuous and beautiful for your mind as saying she was the cannibal of the seas? There's just no comparison, is there? So that is why J.M. Barrie's writing style, and in particular these two moments that I've picked out for you as an example of that, that's why that's in the second most biggest beautiful moment in this story. So we've talked about all the different plots and threads and strands all going through the story of Peter Pan, some of which you might know, some you might remember, some you might never have been aware of. And I've told you about some of the most beautiful moments of writing and of story and of character in the plot of the story. And I'm going to finish this video by telling you about why I think this story will continue to last. Why it will continue to be so important, so beloved, and will keep going for another 120 years. To put it in the simplest terms possible, the story of Peter Pan has anything for anyone. You can be anyone at all, of any age, from anywhere, and there will be something for you in this story. It might be a character you relate to, it might be a character you enjoy, it might be a plot that you really enjoy following, it might be the magic and the whimsy, it might be the escapism, the fairy tale, it might be the darkness driving through the heart of this story, it might be the philosophical questions and all of the mystery and wonder. But there is 100% something for anyone at all. And whatever it is that you find will stick with you as well, in the way this story stuck with me since I was a little kid. Some of it is the writing style, it's just grabbed me and never let go. But the story and the characters itself, there's just so much to them. I really encourage rereading of this story. I obviously do it a lot when I go back to do research for these videos for all of you guys. I like to fact check myself, but also I just never could get tired of reading it, whether it's the play script or the novel. It almost feels like the story changes a little bit every time you read it. You notice something else, or you have an idea about something else. You remember something new. You follow a different plot thread. You focus on a different character. Whatever it is that you focus on, it is definitely worth rereading over and over again. Within that as well, to recommend it to you on a practical level, it's also a pretty short book. There is no filler in this story. story, as I've talked about many times, one of the big things I love about J.M. Barrie's work, but also you can crack through it fairly quickly. The audiobook is only a few hours long if you want to listen to it. You could sit down and read it in a few hours or a couple of days, depending on how much you wanted to read at once and how much time you had. I wouldn't necessarily say it's an easy read. That depends entirely on how much you enjoy fantasy and poetical language. If, like me, you lap that up, then absolutely it's a very easy read. It all flows and feels beautiful. But if that's not really your style, it might take you a little longer just to get into the flow of it. But it is definitely absolutely gorgeous. So even if you don't think it's for you, I recommend giving it a go anyway, just to experience the writing. Also, the proof is kind of in the pudding, isn't it really? This story has already lasted. I think it will continue to last for another 120 years because, well, it's still going strong now. I'll wrap up this section talking about the legacy of Peter Pan and how I think it's going to continue on for many, many years by talking about possibly one of the biggest things about Peter Pan's legacy, and that, of course, is what it has done for Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. As you might know, Great Ormond Street was given by J.M. Barrie all of the rights and the royalties, essentially all the money made from the story of Peter Pan in its play form and in the novel. They were all given to Great Ormond Street Hospital. This was huge and has benefited the hospital for the 120 years since. And luckily, thanks to edits to the UK law, it has continued to be able to do so. Unfortunately, outside of the UK, the copyright law has lapsed, which means that people are just able to use this story without paying any money towards the hospital whatsoever. And while, of course, it's legal, they can do, well, as has been proven on this channel, people have done many, many things to this story. Yep. I personally do wish that they would at least donate to the hospital when they do, because at the end of the day, it is someone else's work that you are using. And if you didn't come up with the entire thing yourself, I do think you should have to pay for it. A big part of that for me, though, is because these royalties go to the hospital. And I do think that even outside of the UK, people should morally want to donate to this hospital, even if you don't have to. But thankfully, in the UK, the law doesn't look like it's going to change at any point in the next 120 years either. So hopefully this legacy can keep going. And with every stage production, with every selling of the novel, with every selling of the play script, this hospital can continue to make money, and the Peter Pan legacy will continue to help more and more sick children. That will wrap up this video then, celebrating World Book Day 2025. I have talked to you about my love of the story of Peter Pan, why I love it, what's beautiful about it, and why I think it's going to continue to last, and why it is important that it does. Not just because I think the story deserves to continue being told, but also because, quite literally, this story helps sick kids. So if you can, then please go out and buy a copy of this book or just donate directly to the Great Ormond Street Hospital. They will deeply appreciate it, and so will I. To celebrate World Book Day then, if you guys want, leave in the comments down below what is your favourite story. It can be a fairy tale, a novel, a play, a movie, whatever it is. Let me know in the comments down below. And if you have written your own story, please tell me about that in the comments as well. You can write the whole thing out if you want, just give us some cliff notes, whatever you want to do. I will read all of the comments because whatever you guys write is genuinely fascinating to me. Thank you so much as ever for engaging with this content. If you want to ask questions, put those in the comments too, or head on over to the TikTok page and drop a comment question in there and I will do a little video reply as and when I can. And if you are watching this on World Book Day, go over to the Peter Pan Lore TikTok page because I shall be going live tonight to celebrate World Book Day, having a little chat about the lore and probably continuing to do some painting. Thank you for engaging with this content as ever. I hope you have a magical day.